My name is Charlotte Silva. I am 34 years old, and until 3:12 p.m. on an ordinary Tuesday in October, I believed I was a good daughter. Not good in the way people praise publicly, good in the quiet, exhausting way that never gets noticed. I was the daughter who remembered my parents' doctor appointments without being asked, the one who paid bills before reminders arrived, the one who apologized first, even when she hadn't done anything wrong, just to keep the peace intact. If my family was a machine, I was the part that absorbed friction so everything else could keep moving. That afternoon, I was standing barefoot in the kitchen of the house my grandmother left me. The house everyone talked about in numbers, but I remembered in smells. Dried lavender, old wood, lemon oil on the counters. The appraisal had come in the previous week, 980,000. The real estate agent said it with a smile, like it should mean something magical. To me, it felt unreal, like Monopoly money taped to memories. The faucet wouldn't stop dripping.
Blip, 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 blip.
A slow, deliberate sound that crawled under my skin. I tried tightening the handle. Nothing. I tried ignoring it. Worse. So I went looking for the warranty paperwork. My father, Daniel Silva, had reorganized my utility files the last time my parents stayed over. He liked systems, labels, order. He liked control disguised as help. If I tore through the garage without knowing exactly where to look, I would hear about it for weeks. So I did what I always did. I called him. My phone lit up with Dad. My chest tightened automatically, the way it always did, muscle memory shaped by years of careful conversations. I adjusted my voice before he even answered, smoothing it into something pleasant and small. He picked up on the fourth ring. "What?" he said. I could hear clinking dishes, voices layered over one another. A restaurant. Probably that overpriced bistro downtown where a salad cost more than my weekly groceries. "Hey, Dad," I said lightly. "Sorry to bother you. I'm trying to find the warranty for the kitchen faucet. It's leaking again. Do you remember where you put it?" "For God's sake, Charlotte," he snapped instantly. "I'm eating. Can this not wait?" "I just didn't want to dig through everything if I didn't have to," I said quickly. "Just tell me the shelf." "Blue bin, top shelf, left side, behind the paint cans," he rattled off. "Use your eyes for once." "Okay, thanks, Dad. Enjoy lunch." "Yeah." I heard the sound of the phone being set down, plastic scraping against wood. I waited for the call to disconnect. It didn't. The line stayed open. I should have hung up. I should have pressed the button and walked to the garage. I should have protected the fragile illusion I'd spent decades building. But I didn't. Through the speaker, the restaurant noise sharpened, a server asking if everything was okay. My father's distracted grunt. Then my mother's voice floated in, soft, warm, almost melodic. "Elena Silva." "Who was that?" she asked. "Charlotte," my father said, exhaling like my name weighed something, calling about some stupid warranty. "She can't do anything on her own," my mother sighed. "Always needs help." My fingers curled against the counter. "She's whining about the faucet," my father added. I told her where it was. Glass clinked. Ice shifting. He was drinking. I stood perfectly still. Then his voice dropped. Lower, quieter. The voice he used when he thought no one was listening. "She's a burden, Elena. She really is." The words didn't echo. They landed. I stopped breathing. "I know," my mother said gently. "I know, but we have to be patient. We just need to play this right." "I'm tired," my father muttered. "I'm 64. I should be relaxing, not tiptoeing around her guilt." "You know the plan," my mother continued. "We just need a few more months. We get her to sign the deed, estate planning, tax protection. She won't question it." "She's stubborn about that house," he said. "She's guilty," my mother corrected calmly. "That's her trigger. You just remind her of everything we sacrificed. Your back, the medical bills when she was little. She'll fold. She always does." My stomach turned to ice. "The market's high," my father said. "That place is almost $1 million. We sell it, buy a condo in Florida, still walk away with plenty." "We move in first," my mother added. "Make it ours. Then we tell her it's too much for her alone." "She owes us," he scoffed. "If it weren't for us, she'd be nothing." My hand slipped, gripping the granite edge so hard my knuckles went white. 34 years of love collapsed into a spreadsheet. I wasn't a daughter. I was an asset. Targets don't scream. Targets don't cry. Targets listen. Slowly, carefully, I placed the phone face down on the counter and switched on the voice recorder. Every word after that, every insult, every plan was captured. When the call finally ended, the kitchen felt hollow. The faucet dripped again. Plip! I stared at the screen. Recording done 6:14. I renamed it. The truth. I didn't cry. I opened my notes app and started a list. I titled it Eviction Strategy. The water dripped once more. This time, it didn't sound like a leak. It sounded like a countdown. Most people think rent is money you hand to a landlord on the first of the month. They think it's a simple exchange, currency for shelter. But in my family, rent was paid differently. Rent was silence. Rent was swallowing opinions until they dissolved in your throat. Rent was gratitude so constant it became a tax. I learned that early. We lived in a modest suburban house that always smelled faintly of my father's work clothes, metal, oil, exhaustion, and my mother's nervous cooking. Dinner was the centerpiece of everything that went wrong. Every night at 6, we sat at the same laminate table, the one with the loose leg that wobbled if you leaned too hard. The television was always off, not for conversation, but because my father demanded attention. Daniel Silva worked hard. That was the unspoken law of our home. His labor was not just work, it was a moral credential. He wore it like armor. If the food was overcooked, he sighed. If it was perfect, he said nothing. I learned to eat quietly. The clink of a fork against a plate could trigger a lecture that lasted half an hour. "You have no idea what this costs," he'd say, pointing his knife at me. "Electricity, gas, roof over your head. You sit there warm and fed and think it just happens. Be grateful, Charlotte." Gratitude wasn't a feeling, it was a mandate. I became an expert in weather patterns. Not the sky, but my father. The way the front door opened told me everything. A slow click meant safety. A slam meant a storm. On storm nights, I disappeared into my room, turning pages slowly, breathing quietly, trying not to exist too loudly. My mother was different. If my father was a hurricane, my mother was humidity, quiet, suffocating, impossible to escape. She never yelled, she maneuvered. "Sweetheart," she'd say, her voice softening, leaning in my doorway. "Your father's had a hard day. Why don't you go downstairs and listen to him for a bit? It would really help." I was the buffer, the shield. Afterward, she'd hug me and say, "We're a team." But I always felt like the teammate sent onto the field to take the hit while the quarterback stayed safe on the bench. There was only one place where the air felt clean. Every Saturday morning, my grandmother picked me up. Isabel Rivera, my mother's mother, was nothing like her daughter. My mother had soft edges and quiet knives. My grandmother was steel-wrapped in silk. She lived in a mid-century ranch house on the other side of town. When I stepped inside, the knot in my chest loosened. Jazz played low on the stereo. There was always fresh fruit on the counter, food I was allowed to eat without asking. She didn't treat me like a child. She treated me like a person who needed preparation. She didn't teach me how to bake cookies or sew buttons. She taught me how to read a bank statement. I remember sitting at her kitchen island, my feet swinging, as she slid a heavy ledger toward me. "Look at this, Charlotte," she said, tapping the paper. "This is freedom. Money isn't about buying things. It's about buying the right to say no." She taught me about interest, about property taxes, about ownership. One afternoon, while we were pulling weeds from her garden, I complained about a promise I didn't want to keep. She stopped, wiped her hands on her jeans, and looked me dead in the eye. "Never sign anything when your heart is shaking," she said. "If you feel guilty, put the pen down. If you feel scared, put the pen down. Contracts are for paper. Emotions are for people. Don't mix them." I didn't understand it then. I would later. My grandmother died on a Tuesday. Massive stroke, fast and unforgiving. She was gone before the ambulance arrived. I was 29. The world collapsed quietly. At the will reading, my parents sat holding hands. My father wore his best suit, uncomfortable and impatient. My mother dabbed dry eyes with a tissue. The lawyer cleared his throat. "To my daughter Elena and her husband Daniel," he read, "I leave the sum of $50,000. I saw disappointment flash across my father's face. It wasn't enough. Not really. Then the lawyer turned the page. "To my granddaughter, Charlotte Silva, I leave the remainder of my estate, including the property at 420 Cedar Lane, fully paid, and funds to cover maintenance and taxes for 5 years." The room went silent. "That house is worth nearly $1 million, my father said sharply. The lawyer nodded. "The title transfers immediately. There are no trustees." On the ride home, my father didn't speak. My mother stared out the window. When we reached their house, my father finally said, "Well, it stays in the family." That was the first time I heard the phrase family asset. In the months that followed, I moved into my grandmother's house. I slept in the guest room. I watered her plants. I breathed for the first time. My parents burned through their money quickly, and then they started visiting. At first they asked, then they didn't. My father inspected things. My mother rearranged them. They talked about space, about retirement, about what made sense. I told myself they were grieving. I told myself I owed them. I built the cage myself and handed them the key. Looking back, I see what my grandmother already knew. She skipped a generation on purpose, and I almost undid everything she tried to protect. The invasion didn't start with shouting. It started with a chair, a beige recliner from the late 90s, overstuffed, sagging in the middle, stained with years of coffee spills and basement dust. My parents brought it over on a Sunday morning without calling. I was standing in the living room with a mug of coffee, admiring the way the sunlight hit the hardwood floors I had just paid $2,000 to refinish, when the front door opened. No knock, just the unmistakable sound of a key turning. "Pivot, Daniel, pivot," my mother's voice called out. I froze. They wrestled the recliner through the doorway like it was a prized possession. My father grunted with effort, not once looking at me as the chair scraped dangerously close to the freshly painted trim. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Bringing the chair," my mother said brightly. "Your father needs somewhere comfortable to sit when we're here. That sofa of yours is too low, bad for his back." I had chairs, good chairs, thoughtfully chosen chairs. "That thing?" my father scoffed, dropping the recliner onto my floor with a heavy thud. "That's a museum piece. A man needs padding." He dragged it into the center of the room, not near the wall, not angled discreetly, right in the middle of my open floor plan. Then he sat, pulled the lever. The footrest sprang out with a rusty screech. "Now this," he sighed, closing his eyes. "This feels like home." It was a flag planted in my living room. From that day on, the boundaries didn't blur. They dissolved. My mother trailed her fingers along my walls, commenting on paint colors that would appeal to buyers. My father critiqued repairs I paid for. They talked about equity and long-term planning, like shareholders with full voting rights and zero investment. Then the conversation shifted, subtly at first. "You know," my father said one evening, staring at the garden, "a woman alone in a house like this is a target." "I have insurance," I said. "Insurance finds loopholes," he replied. "If this were in a trust or joint ownership with us, it would be safer." "For inheritance," my mother added smoothly. Peace of mind. Peace of mind always came with a price. I almost said yes. Instead, I bought them a vacation. $8,000 for a Mediterranean cruise. A desperate attempt to buy distance. They took the tickets without thanking me. "The least you could do," my father said, "after all the years we paid for your braces and piano lessons." The invoice of childhood. The breaking point came a week before the phone call. I came home early from work with a migraine splitting my skull. A white van blocked my driveway. Bates Construction was printed on the side. I hadn't hired a contractor. A man with a clipboard stood on my porch, looking up at my roof. "Can I help you?" I asked. "Just finishing an estimate for the Master Suite edition," he said cheerfully. "Met with the owner this morning." My stomach dropped. "The owner?" I repeated. "Yeah, Daniel Silva," he said. "Nice guy. Said he and his wife are moving in next month." I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. "I am the owner," I said, "and there will be no addition." The man's face drained of color. Inside, I found coffee cups in the sink, lipstick on one rim. They had let themselves in. They weren't visiting anymore. They were erasing me. That night, I sat in the living room, staring at the recliner. It wasn't furniture. It was a throne. I didn't scream. I didn't call them. I locked the door and listened to the house settle. They thought they were moving in. They didn't know the war had already started. I listened to the recording again that night. Not once, not twice. I listened until the words stopped sounding like my parents and started sounding like evidence. I sat at my grandmother's kitchen island, the same place she once taught me how to read a balance sheet, and watched the waveform spike and dip on my laptop screen. Every time my father said burden, the sound jumped. Sharp, aggressive, final. I wasn't shaking anymore. That scared me more than the anger. When fear leaves, something else moves in. Clarity. I made coffee and didn't taste it. I opened a spreadsheet and titled it Operation Eviction. 3 columns. What they say, what's true, what I can prove. They say they're struggling. They say the pension isn't enough. They say they're helping me. The truth came faster than I expected. 2 days earlier, my phone had pinged while I was at work. A text from my mother. "Sweetheart, can you send me a photo of your driver's license and passport? We're booking that family trip. Travel agent needs the info." I had sent it without thinking. Helpful, always helpful. Now I understood. They weren't booking a trip. They were collecting my signature. I called my bank. "Fraud," I said clearly. "Potential identity theft." I froze my credit. All 3 bureaus. I set a verbal password required for any transaction over $100. "What would you like the password to be?" the representative asked. I looked around the kitchen. Lavender, I said. Then I hired a lawyer. A woman, sharp, direct, no warmth in her eyes. She looked at the recording, the contractor's card, the timeline. They have nothing, she said, but they think they do. That's dangerous. What do we do? I asked. We remove the asset, she said, quietly. I sold the house off market. No listing, no signs, no warning. A private buyer. Cash. Fast close. While the paperwork moved, I did something harder. I separated my life from theirs. Blue tape for my belongings. Red tape for theirs. Green tape for disputed items I didn't want smashed in retaliation. The recliner got red. So did the boxes in the spare room. The coats, the papers, the pieces of themselves they had scattered through my space like ownership markers. I rented a storage unit in their names, paid 6 months up front. I wrote one note, 3 sentences. The house is sold. Your belongings are in storage. Do not contact me. Then I left. I didn't wait to see their faces. I didn't need to. They came home on a Tuesday evening. I wasn't there. The house wasn't either. I know this because my old phone, factory reset, number forwarded to a cloud voicemail, lit up with notifications as I drove north toward a city where no one knew my last name. 6:18 p.m. voicemail received. My father's voice exploded through the speaker when I played it later. Charlotte, open the door. The lock is jammed. This isn't funny. 6:32 p.m. My mother, breathless, trembling. Sweetheart, we're outside. The house is empty. Please call us. We're scared. 7:04 p.m. The tone shifted. You sold our house, my father snarled. You think you can run? You owe us. I saved every file. When they showed up at my office the next morning, screaming, pointing, demanding, I didn't go down. Security handled it. Cameras recorded it. Evidence stacked itself neatly. They sued. They lied. They submitted a forged document claiming I'd agreed to transfer the deed months earlier. They forgot one thing. I keep receipts. I wasn't even in the state on the day the document was supposedly signed. Plane tickets, hotel invoices, a photo of me on stage at a conference, time-stamped. The judge didn't raise her voice when she listened to the recording. She didn't need to. She dismissed their case, granted a permanent restraining order, referred the forgery to the district attorney. My parents didn't look at me when we passed in the hallway. They looked smaller, older, human. Later, alone in my apartment, I opened a small wooden box. Inside were lavender seeds my grandmother had saved for me. A note in her handwriting. A house is just walls. A home is where you can breathe. I planted the seeds on my balcony that night. The burden wasn't me. It never was. I finally put it down.